Right. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the November 17th Freight Stakeholders Task Force meeting. My name is Tim Garrett. I'm a regional planner with Sandag, leading the meeting today. Time is 9:03. We're going to get this meeting started. Let me share my screen here, pull up the agenda. And hopefully okay, screen sharing. Somebody let me know if it's not sharing. Thank you all for being here. My name's Tim Garrett, like I said. We'll start with the meeting minutes. This is item number 2. So this is the task force is asked to review the minutes from our previous meeting in July. There's no actions required, but definitely let me know if there are any issues that need to be corrected. So that's the agenda is attached to the Outlook calendar meeting. So if you want to open that up, I'll scroll through very slowly or quickly here through the minutes. Please take a look at that and let me know after the meeting if there's any issues. Note that right after the minutes, we have the comment log for the comments we received from the stakeholders at the last meeting in July on the sustainable freight implementation strategy, along with the response from the project team. And we plan on revisiting these comments throughout the project and updating the log as we address them. So if there's any comments on that, definitely raise a hand now if you want to say anything, or you can email me after the meeting and we can get those updated. No comments on the agenda on the minutes. Then we'll move on to the item number 3, which is the public comments. So this is for members of the public. We have an item later on in the agenda, which is for agency updates. So for this is just the members of the public who have an item to address to the group that's not on the agenda. Please, if you want to make a comment, keep your comments limited to 3 minutes so we can get to the maintain time for the rest of the agenda items. At this time, ask for any hands from the public. Any public comments?
Good morning, everyone. Sean Wilcock from Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation. I just want to make a quick comment about our inland port project. I don't know if any of you have been made aware of it, but I thought it would be important for this group to understand about our logistics facility that we have under development. We are putting together approximately 5,000 to 6,000 acres for an inland port facility here in the north part of Imperial County to serve the 11 western states, to be connected to the ports of LA and Long Beach via the existing rail. And this facility, again, would serve the 11 western states within a 24-hour period. We are putting this together as a distribution cluster. Everyone's heard of distribution centers, but this would be a cluster of distribution centers. So you'd have distribution for Target, Amazon, Lowe's, Home Depot, all the big merchandisers out there. So there would also be some light to medium manufacturing occurring in this facility as well. So just thought I'd bring that to your attention so it's on everyone's radar, because it's very much to do with sustainable freight. The whole facility will be zero emissions. It also will be the developer on the facility is the same developer as the World Logistics Center up in Moreno Valley off the 60. Many of you may have seen the Skechers building up there. They've got 4 million square feet under roof up there. Same developer that we're working with. So yeah, that's all I had to share.
Thank you, Sean. What would be the approximate timeline for the development of that site?
Well, we've been working on it for 5 years, and we're kind of coming out in the public with it. It's going to take another year or so to tie up the rest of the land. We have about 3,000 acres under control today, and we just need to wrap up the remaining private land. And then we start the CEQA process, which, could take another, 4 years at least. So at full build out, it will employ approximately 20,000 people.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. Definitely look forward to learning more about that as it's being developed. So thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
All right, recognize Frank Cassidy.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to address all of you. My name is Frank Cassidy. I'm with a company called Cameramatics, and I just wanted to ask or find out. I know that in San Diego and the region in general, there's a huge push for safety, especially Vision Zero, and as well as tying that in with sustainability. It's the on-vehicle technology. I know that a lot of you are focused on infrastructure, various routes, etc. But I wanted to find out if there are any technology, on-vehicle technology programs that Sandag as a group are taking a look at. And the reason I ask that is, I suppose it's a selfish question. It's the company I'm with, Cameramatics. We provide that type of system, which provides video, but also data to help understand fuel efficiency, etc. And one of the things that we're looking to do within the San Diego region is if there are a fleet or a body who wanted to pilot that technology to understand it, to make that available. So thank you.
Thank you, Frank. If you could put possibly your contact information in the chat, if anybody wants to follow up with you on that item, I think that would be potentially helpful. And we'll be talking about some related aspects on vehicle technology, especially in terms of fuel saving technology, but potentially safety is just as important in terms of that. So thank you, Frank. Any other public comments? All right, let's go back to the agenda. And we'll start with, we'll go over to next item is number 4. So that's the next generation 511. So we'll be having a presentation from Suha Natarajan and consultant team. So hand it over to Suha.
Sure. Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everyone. My name is Suha Natarajan. I am a senior ITS planner at Sandag, and with me today, I have Michelle Boucher and Ty Manzo from our consultant team. They will walk us through this presentation, but before turning it over to them, I would like to provide some opening remarks and some context on the item before you. One of the key components, as many of you may recall, in the 2021 regional plan is the Next operating system, which is focused on providing technology components that connect our transportation systems, but also provide innovative transportation systems that strive to provide access to different transportation modes, options, and get people where they need to go efficiently and safely. So in order to proceed with the planning and implementation of new technology components that would support the Next OS, we start the process of what we call the concept of operations report, which essentially documents user needs and how technology and data will be used for the proposed systems. Many of you may know Sandag implemented the existing 511 traveler information system for the San Diego region in March of 2007. The 511 system that's currently in place provides information on traffic, transit, and roadway conditions to systems users via telephone or IVR, interactive voice response, and also through web throughout the county. We are now working on the next generation of 511, which is the topic of presentation today. And we would like to add that in past practices, when we consider technology improvements, we would go and get input from our partners. But now as part of this plan and vision, we are committed to make sure that we include the input from the community and all transportation users to better understand and ensure that the proposed technologies actually address the needs of all our customers. So the purpose of coming to the presentation today is to introduce to you and provide an overview of the concept of operations effort that we are developing to improve our 511 traveler information system. And along the way, provide some key initial insights gathered, and finally request to get your input and feedback. So with that, let me turn it over to Ty or Michelle, who will introduce to us the development process for the next generation 511.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Suha. So Michelle, did you want me to present this one? I did. There is some additional information in the SharePoint version of the presentation that might be helpful.
Yeah, so either way, I can go ahead and present the slides.
Okay, and then I'll talk to the slides that I added.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. I don't know if I have the right set of slides up. Did you add to them today?
Yes,
Okay, I might not have the correct setup then.
that's
so
fine. I can just pop over to my screen when it comes time.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. I'm Michelle Boucher. I'm with IBI Group, and we're part of the consulting team that's working on the Next Gen 511 project that Suha just talked about. We're working with Suha and Alex on this. And as part of the project, we're doing stakeholder outreach, and we want to make sure that we hear from the CVO perspective and find out what your needs are for traveler information and planning services. So just to talk a little bit about what the current system is, Suha did mention quite a bit of it. It was deployed in 2007, and you can access the system through the web or through the telephone by calling 511 if you're in the region, and also by the website, which is 511sd.com. And the current system has, it provides access to the traveler information system and some partner agencies. So there's a traffic map that's probably the main page that's shown on this slide that provides current incident, traffic speeds, road lanes or closures, construction events, and other types of information. And then the system also provides links to partner agencies that have information on transit, commuter rail, iCommute, and also you can access the Freeway Service Patrol as well through this portal. So the existing system is outdated at this point since it went in 2007, and so it needs to be upgraded. And so it doesn't necessarily meet the needs of the travelers any longer. So the design, user interface, and also the type of information offered, they're not aligned to the best practices anymore. So in terms of serving the community, we want it to be more focused on transit, access services, and shared mobility, which the current service doesn't offer at all. And some of the data is not integrated, and it's not always as up to date as it should be. So right now, Sandag is soliciting your input to inform this new concept for 511. We're looking for the best and the most useful ways to improve. All the information available through our public transportation agencies and other private partners and sources needs to be integrated and available as a one-stop shop where we can plan multimodal trips, book them, and pay for them. That's the ultimate goal, is to get this single platform for everyone. And we also want to make sure that the ultimate system is equitable, intuitive, and easy to use. So the Next Gen 511 team, we developed a vision, guiding principles, and goals for the project. These are we aligned these foundational pieces, and we want to bring in the needs of the CVO community to this. We want to make sure that we also take those into account. And so we want you to be thinking about what your members need to encourage a sustainable use of 511 as a central source of traveler information. What would your community need to meet your needs for the CVO? So we want the next generation 511 to promote multimodal options, improve improve and facilitate access to end-to-end trip planning and booking and benefit from lessons learned in the previous deployment. In thinking about what next generation 511 will do, we want to make sure that this includes you. Okay, so, oh, maybe I do have the right slides. So here's for you, Ty.
Yep. Okay, sounds great. So hi, everyone. So first of all, I wanted to just acknowledge that we've had a pretty voluminous, this does not represent all of them. This is just kind of a sample, but we've had a pretty voluminous set of user needs already mentioned through, some initial discussions, in our data collection endeavor. And because of that, we've come up with just a handful of themes that I'll just go over very quickly, and that's the next slide, Michelle. And these themes include border crossing information and data, port information, and that also includes airport information and data that's important for goods movement, truck route information, and really at the end of the day, real-time truck route restrictions or alternate route information has been indicated as an important, piece of information, especially in San Diego, where we, frequently have rerouting due to wildfires and things like that. And unfortunately, but nonetheless, that was mentioned. Truck stop and parking information. Parking is always an issue, as we know, for trucking, especially those coming in regionally or long haul. And then roadside safety inspection and station information, basically, where are the way stations? And that could be on either the public or the private side. And then push notifications and real-time alerts just for truckers. So those are some of the themes that are coming up, just to kind of get your juices flowing and help us understand, okay, well, what are we missing? Or that doesn't need to be on the list, maybe is something you're thinking. But so those are just some of the specific trucking specific themes. So that's pretty much it, all I had to add to that, Michelle. So I'll let you finish up here.
Okay, so how can you help us? The way you can help us is by taking the survey. We've put together a survey. It's available both in English and Spanish. After this meeting, we'll provide you the link, and we also have it as a QR code as well. And so we would really encourage you and also to pass it on to others in your community to take the survey as well, because the more input we have, the better. So please do take the time to take the survey. We very much appreciate it, and it will take you less than 5 minutes to complete. And so that concludes what we wanted to share today. And thank you so much for letting us join your meeting. It's much appreciated.
All right, thank you, presenting team. Are there any questions from stakeholders? I see Riley.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I had a question about the truck parking. Oh, sorry, maybe I should inform you guys where I'm from. So Riley Keller, Caltrans Office of Strategic Freight Planning. I just wanted to ask a question about the truck parking information that you're planning to include in the 511 application. Are you also going to include private truck parking as well in there? Just curious.
Would you like me to field that one, Michelle?
Sure, thank you.
So a couple of things. First of all, Riley, thanks for the question. And also just wanted to let you know that I was part of the team for the recent statewide Caltrans truck parking study. And so I have some awareness around, some of the needs that came up through that study, and also what has been determined locally. So in answer to your question, 511 won't necessarily dictate which parking, data sources at this stage, but we will recommend in the concept that both public and private, parking opportunities are at least given an a stage for information dissemination to the trucking community, as they need it. So I guess yes. Yeah, I think that we would be remiss in not including both of those, especially based on the Caltrans truck parking study.
Great. Yeah, glad to hear it. Yeah, and then I was also curious if you guys are looking ahead towards, the system being able to pull in. Well, I know you mentioned real-time data, but also pull in data, because a lot of our our safety roadside rest areas, we're looking to build those out and also include truck parking advanced information systems. So truckers are available to, they have the information available to see how many spaces are there, and whether or not that they need to reroute to another location to park. And so, I think that if you were able to integrate that, once we get to that point, and being able to also show, so like if they're able to see that a safety roadside rest area is full, they can also look and see that there are other private truck parking spaces available that they can reroute to, and save time and park in a safe place. So just some thoughts for future integration for the app.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it? Especially, from, the driver's seat, knowing where an available space is and not having to, get on and off the freeway 6 times to try to find a place to park would be awesome. So that said, duly noted. And maybe as needed, we can follow up with you for any other clarifications on integrating that data and where it will come from, because in fact, if you'd like to send us a note, I think Michelle did you provide some contact info at some point? I didn't remember if that was the last slide.
I did not, but I can add it into the chat, my email
Okay.
address, name for you. But
Yeah.
we would like that. And also, like, if the data layer is available, even eventually we'd like to be able to book and pay, like, so you could even reserve your spot if the trucker knows it's going to be at spot X at 8 p.m. and wants to stay there for the night, that they can book it in advance. Would be another feature that would be awesome to have if the data is available.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think eventually, it's a technology that we're working towards. Currently, we have a project in the works on Interstate 10, which is a joint project with state of California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas to do a whole corridor of these truck parking information systems at our safety roadside rest areas. And I do believe that the plan is to eventually integrate it into our Caltrans maps, that we have a system like that. And the data there should also be available. And I'm sure there'll be some coordination regionally. I believe that's a long-term plan, so that we can disseminate that information. But as we begin to build it out on other routes like the 5 and along, I guess down south would be like what is that?
Interstate 8, perhaps.
The 8, yes, the 8 and things like that. That would be something that I believe that we would be definitely happy to partnership on. You'll provide that.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll look forward to grabbing your, Michelle will provide the contact info, and we'll look forward to you maybe, a little bit more detailed comments if you wish to provide those via email. We would appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. So yeah, you can put your contact information in the chat, and that would be great follow up. I'll take over now. We'll move on to our next item. Got a busy agenda here, so keep it moving. So the next item is item number 5, San Diego and Imperial County's Sustainable Freight Implementation Strategy. So Mariela Rodriguez from Sandag and Bridget Weehart from WSP are going to be presenting this one. So I'll hand it over for the next presentation.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everybody. My name, as Tim said, is Mariela Rodriguez. I'm an associate regional planner with the Goods Movement team at Sandag, and today I'm here with our consulting team, Bridget Weehart and Brandon Ye from WSP to provide the group with an update on the sustainable freight strategies for San Diego and Imperial County. Next slide. You can go to today's agenda slide, Bridget, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is our agenda for today, and I will walk you through the project timeline and project milestones, and then Bridget will go over the existing projects and project type that were included in the original plans for both counties, for both regions, sorry, and how the different types of projects may score under the screening framework that we developed as part of the existing conditions memorandum and that we shared last meeting with you all. And then we'll go over an overview of the proposed projects and seek your feedback. And finally, we will close our presentation with the next steps. Next slide, please. So as shown here, we kicked off the project at the beginning of this year, and since then, the team has worked on identifying the existing conditions and best practices, which we presented to this group in the last meeting in July. Since then, we have been working on developing and screening innovative strategies and projects, and we will be presenting those today. In the coming months, between the month of January and March, the project team will be conducting focus groups, and we'll cover in more detail the mechanics of those at the end of the presentation. We will also have a public survey, which will focus on the general public. Then in spring and summer of 2023, we will develop the implementation plan, and the final strategy is scheduled to be completed in January of 2024. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bridget, and she will go over the existing proposed project.
Thanks, Mariela. So just as a reminder, we are looking at both existing projects and developing new proposals for new strategies. And the idea with the existing projects is, looking at the projects the region, both Imperial County and San Diego County have already planned for freight in terms of how sustainable they are, how they fit in with the goals of the project. And as a reminder, we had the proposed screening framework we discussed last time. Equity, environment, economy, and competitiveness are the main criteria that we're looking at, and we're comparing that to the different types of existing projects. At a high level, we're going to share some of the initial screening results that will tell you which kinds of projects are expected to do well in terms of their sustainable aspects and might be included in the implementation strategy. So on the right side are the types of existing projects in your current plans. I'm just going to review these briefly because I want to spend, would like to spend more time on the new and innovative strategies, but the existing project types in your plans are complete corridor and highway projects. Those include primarily managed lanes. They have alternative fuel corridor improvements. They include truck climbing lanes and freight signal prioritization projects. So those are expected to do pretty well under the screening framework. Many of them serve, from an equity standpoint, many of them serve disadvantaged communities, and to the extent they travel through them, if they are going to be relieving congestion that is causing idling and emissions, that would be considered to be an advantage. Of course, you'd have to look individually at individual projects from an equity perspective. Environments, similarly, again, if you're relieving bottlenecks, that's going to be beneficial from an emissions standpoint. Economy and competitiveness, that is positive. We do need to keep in mind, because there's going to be hopefully improving flow for trucks and all vehicles, but keep in mind that managed lanes currently don't allow trucks in them in California. So that is really on an individual basis to be seen whether the overall, you'd rely on the overall corridor improvements facilitating the truck flow. Marine terminal projects include components to accelerate infrastructure, electrification, and adoption of zero and near zero emission vehicles. So, you know, those are very beneficial. They, from an equity standpoint, our ports are located in vulnerable communities, and they, if you're, these projects are reducing emissions, improving the air quality, then that is beneficial. So also from an environment standpoint, and of course the ports from an economy and competitiveness standpoint, improvements there are helpful. And we're going to have a chance for discussion after I get through the existing project types. And Tim and Mariella, let me know, because I can't see the chat since I'm sharing the screen. If we need to interrupt, go ahead. So existing project types to continue port of entry projects. The focus of those projects are to increase the capacity of cross-border trade, and they include improvements to existing ports of entry, and the focus of those is to improve the efficiency of freight transportation system to the extent that they're focused on the freight system and reduce delay and emissions in vulnerable communities, then those are very beneficial. So from the different standpoints, you can see the check marks to the left. Truck parking projects, and I was so happy to have someone chime in on that earlier, because we also worked on the California statewide truck parking study, and it's a really big problem, as many of you know. Truck parking from a safety, the lack of truck parking from a safety standpoint, and many other efficiency as well. So the focus of the current projects in the plans are to modernize existing truck parking areas. Really the focus on adding near zero and zero emissions fuel infrastructure. So from that perspective, they will help facilitate the electrification of the truck fleet, improve, again, the environment, reduce emissions. Now, from an equity standpoint, many of these might be located in vulnerable communities. Again, if you're adding in electrification, it should be good from an environmental standpoint. However, to the extent if you're adding in more truck parking or attracting more trucks, there may be concerns from the local community naturally in terms of the potential negative effects. So they may not be welcomed. So we'd have to look at that, as particularly again, if you're adding truck parking spaces, which the current projects aren't doing, but they could in the future. From an environmental and economic competitiveness standpoint, they would be beneficial to the extent that they are again focused on facilitating electrification. Also, just serving the needs of the truck parking community, which are not being met, and allowing freight to flow more efficiently and avoid out of direction travel while truck drivers look for parking would be beneficial from an economy and environment standpoint. And then these are the last three existing freight project types. Rail projects are proposed to improve the capacity and service of rail transportation, and they can shift cargo onto a more sustainable mode. Rail is, from a ton-mile standpoint, more efficient than trucking. And so many of these projects would be beneficial from the environmental and economic competitiveness standpoint. Improvements, specific improvements are proposed, listed here. And some of these would be new connections that would facilitate, again, the transition from truck to rail. So generally those would be very sustainable from an equity standpoint. Even though rail projects may be beneficial overall from a GHG perspective, they may have local impacts and may not be benefiting the immediate local community. They may be traveling through the local community. So that is more of a question mark. Grade separation projects, those can be very beneficial, especially at locations where you have a lot of truck backup at the rail at grade crossing. And so those should be prioritized, and also they improve safety. So grade separation projects are not necessarily benefiting the rail traffic as much as reducing emissions and improving the flow of trucks. So again, focus on locations where you have high truck and rail volumes. And again, those projects should score well from all of the different screening criteria. And finally, airport projects. Trucks carrying goods to the airport could be good opportunities for fleet electrification because they tend to be smaller size, travel shorter distances, maybe regional fleets. However, the potential benefits are somewhat limited because of the small number of trucks that travel to the airport, and freight that moves by air has greenhouse gas impacts, but just keep in mind that there are limited modal diversion opportunities for many of those. So they're a little bit more of a question mark from an equity environment standpoint. Airports are not currently located in disadvantaged communities or necessarily serve them. But from an economy and competitiveness standpoint, considered positive. So now we want to hear from you about any further thoughts about the various existing project types and how they would perform in terms of the criteria, how any existing projects could be improved, and what SANDAG and ICTC could do to facilitate implementation of them. So Riley?
Hey, yeah, thanks, Bridget. Yeah, I just had a quick thought and comment about how the truck parking project types perform in terms of equity. I agree with how you mentioned that, if we were to expand truck parking within communities that are already impacted, may not necessarily improve, the effects on the community, the negative effects there. But on the other hand, too, if you were to, like, let's say, provide more supply at a truck parking location that is near but outside of like an impacted community, where trucks who would have wanted to park there, weren't able to because of, the supply being too low and the demand being too high. Therefore, that they moved and they parked on a side street or near, in a community instead of actually parking at a designated location. I think that would improve equity in that sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, we really struggled with this one, so thank you. And sorry, finish up.
Yeah, and so, I think that it just depends on the truck parking project. It can have equity benefits, especially if it's removing trucks parked in like portside communities, waiting to stage or waiting to load, or even just resting overnight, right? If they need to rest or take a break, they pull into a neighborhood and they're parked on, a neighborhood that borders maybe an industrial, community, and, they're running their engine and all that type of stuff. So it might be able to, can remove them as well. So it's just really about the siting, the location of it, and then also just the use case, like what makes sense. So whether if it's like a curb space management type of project, truck parking project, or it's actually a lot. So I don't know. It just, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of borders that.
Yeah. No, totally agree. They need to be looked at on an individual basis. In general, I do think they're beneficial for the reasons that you mentioned. They avoid trucks parking in other places that are going to be more impactful. On the other hand, we just don't want to assume, don't want to dump truck parking projects in vulnerable communities, as they have been potentially in the past. So just want to look at them on an individual basis. Anything else? And I'm sorry, I can't see, I don't know, I can't see all the all the people, but so raise your hand.
I don't see any raised hands or any
Thank
comments
you,
on the chat.
I'll let you facilitate that then, thanks. Okay. So now we'll go into proposed new projects. So exciting. We focused on the strategies and best practices that were in the memo that you saw in July in the presentation. And we used the same categories: technology solutions, fleet management and operations, and infrastructure improvements. Clearly, many of the solutions and strategies fall under more than one category. So that's just really a convenience for presentation purposes. So we'll go through each of those and then get your input and ideas on each of the categories. So technology strategies, there's a number of them. They're shown on the left: fuel savings technology, truck platooning, truck electrification, alternative fuels, idling reduction technology, engine pollution control technology are some of the categories. And we won't be able to go through each of them, but we'll give you some examples. So giving truck fuel saving that have fuel saving technologies incorporated beyond what's required, preferential pricing on certain corridors, such as toll discounts, is one idea. And some of the types of fuel saving technologies are shown here. Aerodynamic treatments to the truck, and tires that reduce use of fuel. Incentives could be phased out as regulations are tightened, and those just become required. Another kind of technology strategy: charging technology. So charging technology is evolving quickly, and there are developments in inductive power transfer, so wireless charging. And the idea would be pilot locations, and they might include Harbor Drive, Bay Marina Drive at the National City Marine Terminal, Crosby Road at 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. And so those are that charging technology. Those are some pilot ideas. Truck platooning and connected and autonomous vehicle technology. Ideas include encouraging truck platooning for long distance or high speed truck movements, and connected and autonomous vehicles. San Diego region already is an AV proving ground that's been developed by various agencies working together. And we'd like to encourage taking advantage of that proving ground by establishing partnerships and securing funding. And SR 905, with its significant truck traffic, is a candidate location for demonstrating CAV technologies. Idling reduction technology is another idea here. Truck idling in the US consumes a huge amount of diesel each year. Investments and regulations at truck parking facilities, rest stops, and other infrastructure that restrict idling and give alternatives could be very beneficial. And some of the technologies are on the right here: electric hookups, auxiliary power units, HVAC hookups. So that's kind of a brief overview of the technology strategies, and we'd like to really get your input on, and you don't have to answer these specific questions in order, just chime in. Are there other specific locations or pilot ideas for these technologies in the region? Any additional technologies that should be considered? And which of these strategies should be prioritized, and what can SANDAG and ICTC do to facilitate them? So just raise your hand and chime in. And if you don't get an opportunity to speak here or don't want to or aren't quite ready, put your thoughts in the chat and or email them, because we do want to hear from you.
I just saw somebody use the applause reaction. I'm not sure if that was intended to be a raised hand, but if you wanted to raise your hand, please go ahead and do that, because I'm not sure who that was.
Bridget, Sean Wilcock from Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation. We have a electric truck charging project, and one of the things that we are looking at implementing is on-site energy storage, because trucks come and go, but a decent amount of energy has to be allocated towards that facility, and so to balance the load, energy storage is needed on site in often cases.
Great. And is that funded and in place, or is it in the plans?
It's in the plans. It's being talked about, and when we know more and when it's not confidential, we can share it with the group.
Okay. Yeah, because we'd like to include it a little more information about it if we can, even as a sort of emerging idea. So that would be great to hear from you about that.
Okay.
I don't see any other comments or raised hands.
Okay. Well, if you have an idea that comes to you later, again, just pop it in the chat or send an email to Mariela or myself. And our email addresses are at the end of the presentation.
Sorry, there's actually a question in the chat from Ty. Ty, do you want to unmute yourself? And
Sure. Hi, Bridget. This is just more not necessarily to answer right this moment, but I was just wondering how deep a dive you all are doing on the sustainability of truck electrification. And that includes the generation of the electricity, the infrastructure, the transmission, and the charging infrastructure versus alternative fuels. I've listened to some schools of thought that say that the overall cost, both environmentally and economically, is actually less for some types of alternative fuels. So I'm just curious if you guys are doing a deeper dive on that one.
Yeah, we aren't, of course, doing primary research on it, but it's a really good point, Ty. In the literature, there are, of course, issues with any of these technologies. But electric has been coming up more recently with concerns about lithium batteries, etc. So we will make sure we note that in the documentation. One thing that has been interesting is in the interviews that were completed, we did hear from those in the trucking community saying, one, that electrification may not be quite there yet in terms of the infrastructure to charge on, but also desire to see exploration of other alternative fuels. So we've opened that up for sure in the strategy. So it's not just truck electrification.
Okay, cool. I'll be looking forward to seeing your research on that. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, so we'll move on, but we can always come back. Fleet management and operations strategies shown here on the left. We're not going to be able to go over all of them, but they include off-hour deliveries, truck parking management, loading, unloading, facilities operations, urban consolidation, zero or low emissions zones, and last mile improvements. And again, these innovative practices were detailed in the memo that you all reviewed last summer. And so we're now just homing in on the ones that we'd like to or see possibility to implement in the region. One idea is to offer toll discounts. We talked about that a little bit already, to zero emission trucks, and maybe pilot that in areas such as AB 617 communities, that are disadvantaged so that you're getting those zero and low emission trucks on the road in those areas that are currently being impacted. Consider expanding managed lane access to trucks, which is not currently allowed. And near-term projects could include I-5 and SR 78. San Bernardino County has proposed using excess passenger vehicle toll revenues from managed lanes to create a clean truck program with incentives to businesses. And that's something that we're proposing be considered in this region as well. Urban consolidation and mobility hubs, those accommodate package carriers with parking, queuing, separate spaces for vans and larger trucks and other amenities. And they potential locations for this are in the Midway Pacific Highway near San Diego International Airport, close to densely populated and mixed use downtown San Diego areas. Proximity to those urban areas enables quick deliveries and limits commercial vehicle miles traveled. So it does improve the environment, can reduce congestion, and be supportive of the economy. And last mile improvements, those include cargo bikes, which are efficient for low weight, low volume deliveries. Example in Portland is Beeline. They can replace trucks for certain trips. They have a smaller parking footprint and they reduce idling and emissions impacts. Bike ped infrastructure and regulations can influence cargo bike use, especially electric in some locations might be prohibited. Hillcrest and North Park are possible locations in downtown San Diego that cargo bikes could be encouraged. Delivery lockers also have benefits. They can provide higher productivity in terms of delivery with fewer vehicles. They can be located in convenient locations and more secure than home deliveries. And they can consider, locations to consider include shared use lockers in the public right-of-way, such as mobility hubs. So, and I'm sorry we couldn't go over all of the fleet management and operation strategies, but are there specific locations, pilot ideas that you have or can suggest? Any other solutions that we should consider, which ones we should prioritize, and what can the counties do? So just again, speak up or put your ideas in the chat.
I don't see any questions or comments and or raised hands, and
Okay.
running
Well,
a little bit tight on time. So
okay, we'll
if
move.
there are no questions or comments, maybe we can move on. And if anything comes up, like Bridget said, we welcome your emails after the meeting.
Okay, great.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Ty. Ty said that she will email her comments.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm surprised we didn't get comments about allowing trucks in managed lanes, but that's something that's sort of an idea that I expected to have some controversy. So if you don't have thoughts about that, send them. If you do have thoughts about that, send them our way. Infrastructure improvement strategies, there's a huge number of those, and they include congestion reduction projects, multimodal connectivity and efficiencies, freight clusters, dedicated truck lanes, truck stops, parking areas outside of metro areas, and intelligent transportation systems. To talk a little bit about dedicated truck lanes, or truck on shoulder, they could reduce conflicts with passenger vehicles, improve safety, and of course, efficiency of truck operations. consider additional opportunities where they may be appropriate, such as SR 905 and SR 502, where there's other locations where there's a large number of trucks and there might be sufficient right of way. Arterial treatments include freight signal priority, which is in use on Harbor Drive 2.0, and arterial treatments could also be considered in other locations. Truck parking, again, a favorite topic. So addressing truck parking, as we discussed, improves safety, reduces emissions, and increases efficiency. Caltrans District 11, we're recommending they explore sites studied in the statewide truck parking study. There was a particular focus on District 11 sites and some additional work done there. Implement truck parking electrification at rest areas is something that's recommended. And there's opportunities for public-private partnerships in truck charging and parking. And with local jurisdictions, and this is a little more complicated, but explore on and off street truck parking solutions in Barrio Logan and other industrial areas where again, a lot of trucks need to stage or park near their point of delivery, and many times they have very tight delivery windows and are not allowed to park on site. So you can end up with problematic parking solutions unless that might not be legal. And so working with the local jurisdictions to identify maybe on-street truck parking locations that could be allowed where it's safe. Also, on-site work with shippers and carriers to allow parking for staging and short breaks for off-street parking. And that's something that we worked on a recent FHWA truck parking guidebook that includes zoning guidance for local jurisdictions to help them in requiring sufficient truck parking with new development, for example.
Bridget, sorry to interrupt. Two things. There's a comment in the chat from Andrea Hoff regarding the track on managed lanes. She said, I missed the comment about tracks on managed lanes, and that completed a study around 2014 on this topic. And the consensus was it is difficult to implement this strategy for a variety of reasons. And the other thing is we are running short on time, so.
Okay, so we'll just move on. Thanks, we'll look at that study. Infrastructure improvement strategies to wrap this up. And this is the last substantive slide is ITS solutions. There are many and quite beneficial, can be quite beneficial deploying more ITS specifically, for example, at border crossing management systems with advanced warning of freight wait times and making those movements more efficient. A regional border management system is a component of advancing border connectivity project. It integrates dynamic lane management, traveler information such as NextGen 511, and border wait time estimation. Variable tolling through the SR 11 Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project. That's some kind of footnote, I think, got in there. So anyway, or maybe that was SR 11. So there's a number of ITS strategies, and we strongly think they can be beneficial to sustainable freight movement. So same discussion. Any ideas, thoughts, additional solutions? What should we prioritize? What can the counties do?
Bridget,
All right.
sorry, if y'all can hear me.
Yes.
could you explain freight clusters in terms of ITS, what that refers to?
Well, I might be able to. I do have to acknowledge that my colleague, Sebastian Guerrero, who is going to present with me, developed some of these ideas, and he's quite sick. So I might have to get back to you on some of these. In terms of the freight clusters, the idea is working with locations where you have high concentrations of freight, and then developing specific ITS solutions in those areas, because there's some synergistic effects. But if Brandon or Tim recalls more details on this one, otherwise I'll have to get back to the group. We'll get back to you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, if you have any further thoughts, please do send us your comments or put them in the chat, and I'll turn it back to Mariela.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you everybody who had comments and questions. We really appreciate any feedback. And as Bridget said, if you have any additional feedback, please email us. Our email address is going to be displayed in the next slide. And for the next step, in December, we will be posting the final innovative strategies and screening memo on the project website, and we will most likely send you an email to make you aware that the memo is posted. Like I said earlier in the presentation, I wanted to highlight once again that we are going to be conducting focus groups and the public survey in the months of January through March. The focus groups will be held in that time frame to obtain input on the existing conditions and the innovative solutions that are proposed for inclusion in the final implementation plan. And we are planning on having 4 focus groups, which will include a range of organizations, including environmental groups, medical organizations, community groups, both in San Diego County and Imperial County. There's also going to be a focus group that will focus on workforce development organizations and the labor groups, and of course, the freight industry representatives and businesses. To maximize the participation in these focus groups, we'll be holding the meetings virtually at convenient times, and there will be interpretation in Spanish to allow for more people to participate. We are working with organizations that we interviewed in the past for part of this project, and also others that we know from different venues, and we encourage suggestions. And specifically, if you have any contacts for organizations, as it has been particularly difficult for us to get in touch and bring into the project the relevant private sectors in freight. So we will greatly appreciate if you can provide any contacts. And with that, we are done with our presentation. So if you can go to the next slide so that people can have our email address, we'll welcome any comments later. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bridget, Mariela. Any other, I assume no other comments on this item, but thank you, and definitely follow up if you have further feedback. So I'm going to pull up the agenda once again. We will be moving on now to item number 6. This is the San Diego Regional Medium and Heavy Duty Zero Emission Vehicle Blueprint Update. So I'll turn it over to Natasha Dulick from SANDAG and Sam Fornazzari from ICF.
Thanks,
Thanks, Tim. I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Sounds good. All right, well,
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I think we can.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Sam. So hi, everyone. My name is Natasha Dulick. I am a regional planner at Sandag on the climate team. Our team previously introduced the Blueprint project at the last task force meeting. So today we're just going to be giving you an update on where things are at. I'm joined today by Sam Fornaziri from ICF. That's our consultant working with us on the project. And this presentation is in the meeting agenda as well as the project fact sheet for your reference. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda for today. First, I'll be going over the project objectives and background in case you weren't able to make the last meeting. Then I'll go over a quick overview of the public outreach and stakeholder engagement plan, which aims at gathering feedback and input from you all and the community members for the project. Then Sam will go over the draft needs assessment, which consists of the market assessment and the vehicle and infrastructure study. And the needs assessment is the current project deliverable that we are working on, and we will be sending out later this month to hopefully get your feedback and input. And then after that, we'll go over some next steps and open it up to questions and discussion. Next slide, please. So as we know, the state of California has some pretty ambitious goals for truck and bus electrification. So the Blueprint project is going to be able to guide the region towards a successful transition over to zero emission vehicles. The Blueprint project is funded by a grant from the California Energy Commission, and we have teamed up with the Environmental Health Coalition and the Port of San Diego for this effort. The Blueprint will identify near, mid, and long-term strategies that can help us reach these goals, as well as address infrastructure readiness, needs, and costs. And a large component of the project is working with key stakeholders and community members to gather that important feedback and input. So I'll be going over that next. Next slide, please. So one of the first steps when it came to working on this project was to complete a public outreach and engagement plan. Sandag is the project outreach lead, with EHC leading the community outreach and ICF helping with outreach planning and developing materials such as the fact sheet and presentations like this for stakeholders. We will be continuing to bring project updates and deliverables to future task force meetings. And really our goal with this plan is to engage with community members and key freight stakeholders such as yourselves to hear from you and see your input for the project. And then in addition to these meetings, we're going to be working with AHC to hold community workshops in the new year. So those dates will be sent out coming this year or early next year. And then, like I mentioned today, we're going to be looking for feedback on the draft needs assessment. So I'm going to pass it over to Sam for him to go over that.
Thanks a lot, Natasha. So I'm Sam Fornaziri from ICF, leading the technical portion as well as the public outreach engagement planning of this effort. So with respect to the draft needs assessment, the way we tackled it, we started with a market assessment, which basically looked at the regulations, the policies, and incentives that are driving the zero emission transition in the medium and heavy duty space, as well as looking at the availability of the technology today and also in the near future, as well as the infrastructure. We also looked at some of the cost components of the infrastructure as well as the vehicles. And then from there, then we started looking into like doing some kind of like modeling and fleet modeling and scenario modeling to see where the region will stand with respect to medium and heavy duty electrification or in general zero emission transformation. And then what would be the need in terms of the zero emission infrastructure, whether that's hydrogen fueling infrastructure or charging infrastructure out into the future and over the next 15, 20 years. So starting with some of the policies and regulations, as Natasha and a lot of other folks in the previous presentations mentioned, there are a suite of different policy that has been adopted and is going to be adopted in the near future in California. Starting with the governor's executive order in 2020, the governor set a goal for California's medium and heavy duty vehicle, specifically drayage truck, to be all zero emission by 2035, and the rest of the sector were feasible to be zero emission by 2045. Earlier than that, California Air Resources Board adopted the Innovative Clean Transit Regulation, which that was the first sort of like regulation targeting medium and heavy duty vehicles, which require transit agency to transition their transit buses to zero emission technology with a goal of like 100% of their purchases to be zero emission by 2030, and the whole fleet to be zero emission by 2040. Following that, CARB adopted Advanced Clean Truck Rule, which sort of like put a ZEV sales requirement on manufacturer to make available a fraction of their sales in California to be zero emission. That regulation going to go into effect in 2024. Starting 2024, medium and heavy duty vehicles that are being sold in California, a fraction of those needs to be zero emission. And that regulation going to go all the way to 2035, which by that time in certain categories, there will be 50% up to 50% or 55% of sales that needs to be zero emission. Following the ACT that was adopted in 2020, CARB is now working on, or California Air Resources Board, or CARB is working on a new regulation called Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, which is going to sort of like, work on the demand side of the zero emission trucks. It is going to put requirements for fleets operating in California as well as public agencies to have a certain fraction of their purchases to be zero emission, and also to replace their older truck, any truck that is more than 18 years or more than 800,000 miles passing their useful life, to replace those trucks with zero emission. So with all of these regulations going into effect, or that has been adopted or are planned to be adopted, we do expect to see a wave of zero emission medium and heavy duty trucks in California. But regulation is only one piece of this. One part of this equation. Another part of this equation are the incentives. Luckily, California is a flush of incentives in terms of especially for the medium and heavy duty zero emission technologies. We do have incentives at the state level, such as, for example, California HVIP program, which provides up to $150,000, but in most cases up to $120,000 for purchase of zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles. There has been programs historically for replacement of older diesel with newer and cleaner technologies, such as Color program, or more recently, VW Mitigation Trust. Aside from the vehicle incentives, there are also incentives toward infrastructure. For example, California Energy Commission, through its Clean Transportation Program, provides significant amount of funding toward deployment of charging infrastructure as well as fueling infrastructure for zero emission vehicles. And also even at the utility levels, for example, San Diego Gas and Electric provides incentives for make readiness, meaning that to make your sites ready for deployment of charging infrastructure at your site, which includes utility level upgrades, like upgrading transformers, upgrading the panel, and making sure that that your sites or depots or whatever the charging infrastructure is going to go will have the necessary power and electricity power to power those. Aside from the vehicle and charging infrastructure, there are also incentive programs on the fuel side. So through the Low Carbon Fuel Standard Program of California, or LCFS, fleets who have deployed chargers, they can earn credits, LCFS credit, that they can sell it in the market of the LCFS market and earn revenue toward reinvesting into their zero emission technologies. Also, very recently, through the Inflation Reduction Act, there has been significant amount of incentives that are earmarked for medium and heavy duty vehicles, especially the tax rebates that can pay up to 30% of the vehicle price up to 40,000 pounds, whichever is lower. So you can see, like, with all of these incentive programs combined with those policies, there seems to be an optimistic picture for the zero emission deployment in California. But again, as we heard, in the past couple of presentations, infrastructure and technology availability still is a big issue with respect to this transition. So that's why we had a close look at the technology availability. And what you're seeing on this slide It's a busy slide. I mean, it's a busy chart, but what you're really seeing on this slide are the type of the medium and heavy duty vehicles. These are like body types along different weight classes. So from class 2B, which represent 8,500 to 10,000 pounds, gross vehicle weight rating, all the way to class 8, shown in dark blue, which is above 33,000 pounds. So you can see across the board that, I mean, there are availability. In certain cases, the availability is low. For example, like one trolley buses or one street sweeper model or make and model that are available. But in certain cases, for example, on a cab and chassis or even on a tractor truck, like class 8 tractor truck, there are a reasonable number of, models that are available out there that are currently either taking orders or are or either like delivering those trucks today. So availability is one side of making a decision to go to zero emission truck. Another piece is whether that truck is feasible to do the duty cycles of fleet. So that's where the electric range of these trucks comes into play. So since there are so many models out there across all of these weight classes, we try to show the ranges available in a box plot, which, I mean, if you're not familiar with these plots, basically the bottom line is showing the minimum, the top line is showing the maximum of the distribution, but then basically the lower quartile and upper quartile are being shown there, and then you can see the mean, median on this chart as well. So, so as you can see, I mean, the ranges vary. For example, if I take the heavy duty truck as an example, there are heavy duty trucks, I mean, in the market that have the ranges, and these are like class 8 tractor trucks that have ranges as low as like 100 miles with their battery, with the full capacity battery, all the way to 500 miles, which I believe this one is a Tesla Semi that is not available today, but is announced to be available in either in December or 2023 with the first models coming out. And they do have two model offering in two different models of the Tesla Semi long range, which the long range one is expected to have about 1,000 kilowatt hour battery capacity and going to 500 miles. But you can see on average, these trucks, the models are out there is somewhere around 210, 220 miles of electric range today. And the ranges vary across different body types, over different vehicles. For some of these, you can see there's no boxes, like just a line. And those are the vehicles that I mentioned. There's only one model out there, so there's not much of distribution really for them. Aside from the electric range, we also looked at the cost of these vehicles. The cost of these vehicles are still significantly higher than their diesel counterpart or their internal combustion engine counterparts. But with the incentives out there also that include both the pays for both part of the vehicle purchase as well as the fuel credits through the LCFS program, the total cost of ownership of these vehicles could end up being either in parity or in certain cases even lower than their diesel counterpart. But in terms of the upfront cost of these vehicles, first, a caveat, some of these are estimated costs. For example, Tesla Semi has been announced to be 150,000 or 180,000. It remains to be seen what the actual cost is going to be on that. So some of these are based on estimated costs that are in the announcement. So there are some uncertainties when you're looking at these costs. Again, taking heavy duty truck as an example, there are models out there, as I said, like $180,000 with Tesla, which we don't know whether it's going to come to fruition or not, but it is the company announcement regarding the price, all the way to like close to like $600,000 for some of these trucks that have been announced or whether they're available today. So you can see the range of cost is significant. But on average, these trucks are somewhere around $375,000 to $400,000. Today, with respect to heavy duty. There are also costs for other type of vehicles that you can see. Some of them are much higher, like transit buses are higher than heavy trucks, and some of them are lower. So aside from the vehicles, we also looked at the charging infrastructure, the type of charging infrastructure that are available, as well as the the cost for those charging infrastructures. So one of the work we did was that we did look into a lot of different literatures and studies that have been done, such as those by ICCT, the International Clean Transportation Coalition, and National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Rocky Mountain Institute, or EDF and GNA. They have done a bunch of studies regarding the cost of the charging infrastructure on both the equipment cost as well as the installation cost. And one of the things that we found out is that most of these studies are showing similar ranges, not exact, numbers, but similar ranges for the equipment cost. But when it comes to really to the installation cost, these studies are showing a variety of different ranges for those costs. And this was also something that we found out by looking at the data from all of the, DC fast chargers that have been funded through the California Energy Commission, that they had data for both the equipment cost as well as the installation cost. And one of the things we found was that the equipment cost, sometimes it varies. There are different type of chargers, different vendors, different time frames that these chargers were bought. But then one thing that really makes the cost of charging very significantly is the installation cost. And that makes sense in general, because the installation cost, depends on many different factors. As we talk, like the make readiness is one of the big factors, depending on how much trenching needs to be done. How much upgrade to the facility needs to be done in order to make that facility ready for deployment of chargers. Depending on all of those factors, the installation cost could vary significantly, which end up having a large range for just the 50 to 63 kilowatt chargers across the board in terms of the overall cost. So keep that in mind as we are thinking about the cost of the infrastructure. There's a huge variability related to that, specific to the installation piece of it. So we talked a lot about the electric and battery electric trucks. There are also, hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles that has been introduced specifically in transit space, but are also being under development, and in certain cases being introduced also in the heavy duty Class 8 trucks. So these are some of the examples of the fuel cell electric vehicles that are currently available or expected to be available in the next year or so, in both the Class 8 trucks as well as some of the transits. The costs are certainly on the higher range of the zero emission vehicles, but mainly specifically talking about Class 8 trucks, since we talked about them in the previous slides too. One of the benefits of the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles is the fact that they can have much higher ranges without much of a loss in the cargo capacity or payload capacity. In general, hydrogen has much higher energy density than battery. So although hydrogen itself still is pretty expensive on a per energy unit, but the fact that they can go longer ranges without much of the cargo capacity loss, they show some potential, especially for the long range transit as well as long range heavy duty, medium and heavy duty vehicle operations. So with respect to the cost of the hydrogen fueling infrastructure, there has been some pilots and some programs that has been funded by the California Energy Commission. And there are significant ranges depending on the capacity of those stations, but on average, looking at some of the studies that have been done in California, we are seeing an average of $5,000 per kilogram per day capacity. So if you have 1,000 kilogram per day hydrogen station, you can, on average, you can estimate that the cost for the whole capital cost for deploying that fueling infrastructure to be around $5 million. So that's just an average cost. We do have seen, projects that are much higher or projects that are much lower in terms of that cost, but on average, that's what we are expecting to see when we get to the high capacity hydrogen fueling infrastructure. So that was the market assessment, which we covered the policies, incentives, the vehicle market, as well as the infrastructure market, and the costs associated with those. Now that we have those, we're moving on to the medium and heavy duty infrastructure study and scenario modeling for that. But before I do that, I just want to take a pause here, maybe for a minute or two, and see if there is any immediate questions that you guys might have regarding the market assessment before we jump into the more of like the core modeling study that we did as part of this blueprint project. Natasha, do you happen to see anyone, any raised hand or any questions in the chat?
I don't.
Okay. If there's none, we can move forward with the vehicle and infrastructure study, and then we can also take questions after this section. All right. So moving on. So now that we had that, we have that background, we started to look at what the future going to look like, or for the San Diego region in terms of the mix of the vehicles, and then and most importantly, what level of infrastructure investments and what level of infrastructure build out is needed in the region to support this wave of zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles that will be operating in the region. So to do that, we relied on California Air Resources Board on-road mobile source emission inventory tool called MFAC model, which luckily it already reflects some of those regulations we just talked about, the ICT, Innovative Clean Transit, as well as the Advanced Clean Truck. It also reflects the most recent CARB's low NOx emission standards for diesel trucks. So it does reflect some of those, but it doesn't reflect the upcoming Advanced Clean Fleet regulations. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of the fleet composition in the San Diego region with respect to the vehicle population. Right now, 61% of the vehicles that are operating within the region, and when I'm talking about vehicle population, these are not registered vehicles. These are the vehicles that on a typical day are operating in the region. So based on the data out of MFAC model, 60% are Class 2B3. These are like pickup and vans between 8,500 pounds to 14,000 pounds in gross vehicle weight rating. There are 15% that are Class 4 through 7. These are, again, medium and heavy duty vehicles that are less than 33,000 pounds, but above 14,000 pounds. And there are 10% that are Class 8, heavy duty truck that are above 33,000 pounds. The rest are buses, which include transit buses, airport shuttle buses, motorhomes and motor coaches. So anything with a body type that is similar to a bus. So this is about the vehicle population. But then when you, but vehicle population is a good metric when it comes to the, for example, like calculating the total cost for like transitioning the vehicles to zero emission. But when it comes to the energy consumptions, as well as like, the emissions impact and the greenhouse gas impact, usually VMT is a better metric, mainly because, as you can see, although Class 8 trucks are only 10% of the fleet composition in San Diego region, they're responsible for almost 30% of the VMT and much higher percentage of emissions, because on a per mile basis, they consume more fuel and they emit more emissions. And then Class 2B3, although 60% of the population, they're only like 50% of the overall vehicle miles traveled. So this is just to give you a sense of like, how each of those buckets of different vehicle categories that you've been seeing in the previous slide in the market assessments are sharing the overall VMT and overall population. So looking at the baseline mix of the the truck or medium and heavy duty vehicle technologies in the San Diego region. This is a chart coming out of the MFAC model. The reason you're seeing battery electric and fuel cell here is that MFAC is already reflecting the Advanced Clean Truck and Innovative Clean Transit rule, as I mentioned earlier. And because of those two regulations, the model already assumes that a fraction of the fleet is going to be zero emission out into the future. The reason that they are mixed, the model does not distinguish between battery versus fuel cell. That's one of the downsides of the model. But then it does show, at least, it does combine them as the overall zero emission vehicles out into the future. So as you can see, as a result of those two regulations, there is going to be a good fraction, if the fleet is expected to be battery electric and fuel cell. In general, the population of medium and heavy duty vehicles in San Diego region today is somewhere around 150,000. And then out into the future, it is expected to get somewhere around 160,000. So not a significant growth in the terms of the total population of the vehicles, but definitely that there will be a change and a shift in the technology mix as diesel and gasoline technologies are going to shrink, and they're going to be replaced with more battery and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles as a result of the regulation that CARB has adopted. So, but the important question here is that now that with all of those incentives, as well as the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation, how is this going to change? So one of the things we did, we started to reflect the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation, which is going to play a major role in adoption of the zero emission vehicles. We followed the CARB's methodology in reflecting that regulation. So the way that the regulation currently works, it's sort of like targeting three different segments of the trucking and segments of the vehicles, the medium and heavy duty vehicles. It requires public agencies to purchase zero emission vehicles. 50% of their purchases needs to be zero emission starting 2024. 100% by 2027. For drayage truck, again, starting 2024, every new drayage truck that wants to operate at the ports or intermodal facilities needs to be zero emission. And then older drayage trucks or legacy fleet, as they call it, they only have up to their useful life, which again, it's either 18 years or more than 800,000 miles to continue operating at the ports. After that, they cannot operate the ports, and only zero emission vehicles needs to operate. And by 2035, everything needs to be zero emission. They also have a third category that are regulating. It's called high priority and federal fleets, which basically high priority, you can think about any fleets that had more than 50 trucks or more than $50 million in revenue. And any truck that doesn't fall into these three categories remain as unregulated or not affected by the ACF. So in order to reflect this ACF regulation, which is sort of the complicated regulations into our modeling, we had to sort of like split the fleets into what fleets are going to fall into the public, what fleets going to fall into the drayage, what fleets are going to fall into the high priority. We're able to work with CARB to get some of these data, which, for example, in the Class 2B3, the medium duty vehicles or pickup vans, you can see the majority of those vehicles that we've seen earlier, they are going to remain unregulated or unaffected by the ACF, mainly because most of those are neither public nor drayage and do not fall into the high priority. But then on the Class A trucks, you can see that almost like 68% of those trucks going to fall under the ACF regulation. Only 32% going to remain unregulated or unaffected by the ACF, mainly because most of those trucks belong to like large fleets, like more than 50 trucks or $50 million in revenue. There are a lot of drayage trucks that are Class 8, and also like there are quite a bit of like public trucks that are Class 8 too. So knowing those fractions and knowing like what fractions are going to remain unregulated and what fractions are going to be regulated, we overlaid the regulation. But then another piece that we had to make some assumptions about was that was what fraction of these, because both fuel cell and battery electric trucks are going to be are going to be treated as a zero emission vehicle in the ACF regulation. So an important question really was that what fractions are we expecting to be hydrogen? What fraction is going to be battery electric? And that's an important question because when it comes to the, with respect to emission reduction, both of those have like zero emission tailpipe emissions. But then when it comes to infrastructure development or infrastructure planning, it's important to know, or it's important to predict and forecast what fraction is going to be hydrogen versus, versus electric, because they're going to have total different type of infrastructure and different type of investments. So we have to make some of those assumptions based on the limited knowledge we have, and to the extent possible, we want it to also be consistent with what CARB is assuming in their modeling. And what you're really seeing on this slide are some of the assumptions we've made. So for example, for interstate trucks, and these are the trucks that are usually like having long haul operations, they can operate 120,000 miles a year. We assume that starting 2024, if there are trucks in the Class 8 trucks that are coming to the market, probably 50% of them could be fuel cell and 50% will be battery electric. These are the fraction of the zero emission vehicles that are entering the market, not the whole Class 8 truck market. For intrastate trucks, these are trucks that are operating within California. We assumed in the near term 10%, longer term 20% going to be hydrogen. For drayage truck, we assume the same numbers. For all other vehicles, except for Class 2B3, we assumed that there will be a 10% fuel cell electric vehicles, including transit. We know that in certain cases, some of those are already right now that are higher. So for example, transit, there's a lot more investment into the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles as opposed to what CARB has assumed. But longer term, we assume like that would be 10%. And then for Class 2B3, right now we're just assuming all of them going to be battery electric and not much into the hydrogen. A lot of these assumptions. Sorry
to interrupt. I just wanted to, Maurice Eaton asked in the chat, were the fleet mix numbers produced by CARB for MFAC 2021?
Sorry, can you read that question again?
Sure. Maurice Eaton asked in the chat, were those fleet mix numbers produced by CARB for MFAC 2021?
The numbers that I'm showing on this slide, or
the previous slide.
These numbers, so these numbers are not in MFAC. But then the numbers that I was showing here, these are all based on MFAC 2021 model.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. MFAC does not reflect the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule yet. So moving on a little bit more, faster on this slide. I know we also have a couple of other items in the agenda. So after reflecting the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule onto the MFAC 2021 baseline scenario, the right-hand side is the fleet mix you're seeing. Obviously, you can see a much more significant a number of zero emission vehicles, whether they're regardless of battery or fuel cell. But one of the other benefits of doing this modeling was that we were able to separate battery electric from fuel cell. So by 2040, we're expecting somewhere north of close to 75 to 80,000 medium and heavy duty vehicles, zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles to operate in the San Diego region, of which most of them are going to be battery electric, but there will be a fraction of them that are anticipated to be powered by hydrogen. So now that we have those data, we can take those population, estimate their vehicle miles traveled, and then combine them with their expected electricity consumption and hydrogen consumption, and try to come up with how much of energy consumption these vehicles will have out into 2040. Between today and 2040, what sort of infrastructure or power or energy needed for the battery electric trucks, as well as for hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. So these two charts are really showing that energy consumption. By 2040, for example, we're expecting somewhere around 6.5 gigawatt hour per day of energy of electricity is needed to power the medium and heavy duty zero emission or battery electric trucks and vehicles in the San Diego region. And with respect to hydrogen, we're expecting somewhere around like 60 tons per day of hydrogen consumption in the region. So having those energy, our next step is really trying to take those energy consumption, the number of vehicles, the miles that are being driven in the region, and trying to translate those in terms of the number of chargers and number of stations needed. To do that, we're leveraging the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab LBNL's model. It's called heavy load model, which is a model that is also being used by the California Energy Commission as part of the AB 2127 infrastructure planning, statewide infrastructure planning. So we are leveraging that model to determine the needed charging infrastructure needed. And basically the output of that model are going to be something like this. This is not for San Diego, this is for the statewide model run, but it's just as an example. It's going to look like something like this, that basically for every single year, you can see the number of charges by different power type, which we're going to use it to sort of like, highlight the needs for the infrastructure, charging infrastructure in the region, as well as to sort of like estimate the costs and investments needed, whether it's from private capital or the public investments to build out those chargers, and also to determine how many of those chargers needs to be publicly available and how many of those chargers are going to be installed in depots and going to be private chargers by fleets. Aside from the chargers, we're also going to leverage the methodologies that CARB has been using in their 88 report, as well as their self-sufficiency analysis on hydrogen to determine the infrastructure needs for the hydrogen. Similar to the charging scenario, the output of this analysis is going to be the number of hydrogen fueling stations by capacity, of which the capacity is sort of like the kilogram per day of hydrogen that can be supplied, and to determine the number of hydrogen stations as well as the likely cost of those hydrogen stations in the region. We don't expect all of the hydrogen stations to be 2,000 kilogram per day or 1,000 kilogram per day. We expect some of in the near term, there will be more investments into some of the lower capacity ones, and then longer term, there will be a lot more investments in the higher capacity hydrogen stations as these vehicles come on road, and there will be a higher, demand for the hydrogen in the region. So with that, I'm going to hand it over back to Natasha to walk us through the next steps.
Thanks, Sam. So for next steps, these are the upcoming milestones and deliverables for the Blueprint project that we are planning to bring to future meetings. As far as the needs assessment goes, like I said, we're going to be sending out the draft assessment to you all so that you can provide feedback and some insight for us. And then the final blueprint will be ready hopefully in summertime. So we'll be looking out for that. And then next slide, please. And then I know we only have like a minute or two left, but here's some questions on the screen. If you want to raise your hand and ask any other questions, we can also take questions that are in the chat and email you back if we don't have time today. But maybe if anyone has a question, we can answer one or two. Yeah, I don't see any questions. I do see in the chat from Bridget, it sounds like the proposed development that Sean Wilcock from the Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation described at the beginning of the meeting might be an example of a freight cluster. Oh, sorry, that was an answer to a previous question. Okay, well, if no one has questions, like I said, please feel free to reach out to us. Sam, if you want to go to the next slide, our contact information is listed. And feel free to email any of us and we will get back to you. So thank you so much for coming to the presentation, and I'll pass it back to you, Tim.
Great. Thank you, Sam and Natasha. That was so much information and a really good resource. So I definitely encourage everyone on the call to review those slides after and get back to the project team if they have any questions. So thanks. We'll pull up my screen. Move on to the next item now. Pull up the agenda again. So this is this will be a short one. Be Senate Bill 671, Clean Freight Corridor Efficiency Assessment. Just an update on SANDAG's participation. Just an update on the project and provide some information. Okay, so folks see my slides hopefully. Okay. So this was last presented. I believe Jeff Hoyos made the last presentation to this group on this particular item back in March 2022. So several months ago now. So just a reminder that this is a California Transportation Commission, CTC led effort to develop a report to the state legislature on the infrastructure needs for zero emission trucks. So a lot of parallels to the last presentation. The blueprint is looking at, San Diego region specifically. There's parallel effort going on at the state level, looking at statewide needs, and Sandag is an active participant in the SB 671 work group, providing information to the CTC on what some of these local needs are. So progress to date. We have submitted regional recommendations for priority clean freight corridors. There's a map on the next slide, just to recap those. Responded to a request for information on zero emission infrastructure and filled out 2 project request forms on zero emission charging and refueling projects in the region. I'll kind of go through those in the next couple of slides. Corridors we recommended are the red ones. There's the main interregional corridors, recognizing that supportive infrastructure, which would be zero emission refueling and charging infrastructure, would be likely located just off of these facilities, maybe in some of the roads nearby the freight clusters that are off of the highway system. But this is, the main interregional corridors throughout the border region and ports of entry. The request information that we provided information to the CTC on, we provided information. There are a lot of other respondents. So the state compiled the information, which is summarized here. Basically, these are the challenges that are in the fields of technology, permitting, public access to these facilities, demand, the cost, and the duty cycle. And like I said, a lot of these concepts were kind of reviewed in the previous presentation as well. So the projects in San Diego Imperial County region that we provided information on, 2 ones in particular, Sandag and Caltrans working on the Harbor Drive 2.0 Vesta Street Bridge project, as well as the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. Both of those proposed to include heavy duty truck electric charging infrastructure. Provided the known project characteristics to the CTC on those, so they can be informed of what's potentially coming within our region. And then Air Products and Nikola also provided information to the CTC of their intent to install hydrogen fueling stations in the San Diego and Imperial County locations mentioned on the screen. So Otay Mesa, Port San Diego area, Escondido, Fallbrook, and El Centro. So what's next for this task? So the CTC has contracted the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to do research and modeling for the state's most significant truck travel patterns, as well as exposure of communities to diesel particulate matter, as these are likely to be priority locations for zero emission infrastructure installations. And we want to provide the CTC with border specific truck information, since this is kind of unique to the San Diego and Imperial County region within California in terms of what the cross-border drayage trucks, what their needs are. So the number of cross-border drayage trucks is a total share of trucks operating, how many of them, what the origins and destinations are, if they're going to the Port of San Diego, if they're going to the ports of LA and Long Beach, and what are the specific infrastructure needs to support those types of trips. How many trucks are going to be affected by CARB rules? Sam in the last presentation just detailed what the advanced clean fleets will include. We want to have some idea about how many trucks are going to be affected by those, and then as well as the station locations needed near the border. So we've got estimates for some of these figures, but we would, we're looking for the best available information so that we can provide that to the CTC, and definitely welcome suggestions from stakeholders. We're collaborating with Caltrans, we're collaborating with our data science and modeling teams at Sandag to compile this information. But any recommendations from stakeholders, any information that we should be looking at would definitely be welcome. So pause here to see if there's any feedback from the stakeholders on the call. I think it would be, this is kind of where we go, what we're still working on moving forward. So if there's any feedback, and I don't think I can see the chat or raised hands. So if Mariella, if you could help me out if there's any.
There are no questions or comments.
I have a quick comment, Tim, and Mariela, this is Andrea. It would be worthwhile, probably next year when the team up here gets their economic value of cross-border freight study going, which will be collecting data as well. We should coordinate and create some synergies there. There might be useful, mutual beneficial relations there. Just wanted to point that out. Thanks for
Yeah,
the presentation.
definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Great suggestion.
Hey, Tim, this is Jolene. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we're in the process of just now updating, I guess it's the 4th iteration of the statewide freight model. So I know some of what's going into that is pulling some additional data sources to get a better handle on all the heavy truck traffic on all the major corridors.
Oh, that's great. What's the timeline like on that development?
They just kicked it off, so I can check and get back to you on the time frame. It's being managed by Caltrans headquarters.
Okay.
So I can get back with you later today with a time frame for when that data would be available.
Great. Thank you, Jolene.
Sure.
Tim, there is another question. It's more logistical. Is from Roya. It says, is there a reason this meeting was not listed on the SANDAG meeting calendar? And I think that's because we have had an update on our website, and I'm not sure if this meeting will continue to be listed, but Tim, I don't know if you have more information on that.
Yeah, I don't have too much more information on that. We just updated our website a few days ago. I think it was on the 15th, so it's very new. We would definitely like to make sure that gets up on the website moving forward. So if it's not on the website, we'll be sure to communicate it well in advance for future meetings.
And I don't see any other questions.
Great.
Maybe we can move on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's move on. So that's the substance for that presentation. Let me pull up the agenda. All right. So freight stakeholder agency updates. This is item number 8. I believe we're expecting to have a comment from Caltrans. Is anyone from Caltrans prepared to give an agency update?
Hey, Tim. Yeah, I'm here to do that.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Riley.
All right. Yeah, just a few things. I'm sure you guys are aware of the California Freight Advisory Committee, but it is our statewide freight committee that provides advice to the update of the state freight plan, among other freight efforts statewide. So right now we are in a revamp of the California Freight Advisory Committee. There are some new requirements in the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act that requires the advisory committee to vet members for their qualifications. And while we're doing that, we are also opening up to new members for opportunity to bring on some folks that we haven't had in the past. So right now we have an application. I will drop the link if anybody is interested in applying to be a California Freight Advisory Committee member. You may go ahead and apply. Just some background of some of the representative agencies and folks we're looking for. We're looking for folks to represent ports, railroad, shippers, carriers, freight-related associations, local governments, air resources boards, economic development agencies, not-for-profit organizations. I'll drop most of this in the chat so you guys can also read through it. And then also what the California Freight Advisory Committee is about. Last update I'll give is regarding the California Freight Mobility Plan. We are currently in an update of the California Freight Mobility Plan to meet some of the new requirements in the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. The IIJA added 7 new elements and pushed back the timeline for state freight plan updates. So we are working towards that at the moment, and we should have a draft plan for public review in March of next year. We've already done some robust outreach and stakeholder engagement with our AB 617 community folks, our Native American Advisory Committee folks, and just others throughout the state, stakeholder interviews and things of that nature. And so if you'd like some more information, you can find the California Freight Mobility Plan website on our Caltrans page. I'll also drop that link here in the chat too very soon. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Riley. Any other agency updates? Otherwise, I'll provide one from Sandag's side. Right, not seeing any. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now. Brief update. I sent this by email, but just want to make sure that folks on the call have a chance to weigh in. Where's my Zoom? Sorry, I'm trying to share my screen here. So that link will bring up the Kumeyaay Corridor Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan commenting site. So the Caltrans and Sandag are working on CMCPs jointly, and this is one that's ongoing right now. So this is the Interstate 8 corridor through Mission Valley and surrounding areas. So the team is requesting feedback through the website through December 2nd. So just wanted to make sure I announced that. All right. And then not seeing any other agency updates, I'll just quickly bring this up since we're right at the end of our meeting. So item number 9, upcoming meetings, we are anticipating to meet in January 2023. And we don't have a firm date on that yet, but once we do, we will make sure to notify the stakeholders as soon as possible. Make sure you have it on your calendars. And hopefully we'll get it on the Sandag website as well. Okay, I'll see a chat from Riley. Yeah, thank you for sending that information. All right, any other comments from the stakeholder, freight stakeholders? Otherwise we can move to adjourn.
One quick thing that I want to comment, Riley said that to click on the link, but there's no link. So I don't know if you can.
Oh, apologies. Thanks for recognizing that. I thought I was able to get that on there.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for the information.
Let's see if this works. All right, it looks a little garbled, but yeah, that's the link to the application. Sorry.
Thanks.
And looks like it was a success. Okay, great. All right, well, thanks everyone for attending. It's 10:59. We will adjourn this meeting and see you in January. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.